Ambassador Zethkai of the Veltar Republic stood before the holographic display, his 6 arms trembling as he read the message for the 3rd time. The blue-green scales along his neck flared in distress, a biological response his species had developed over millennia to signal extreme anxiety. They said what? First speaker Anna Eltharaw's voice crackled through the calm system from the Republic's capital world. They said. Zethkai's voice caught. He cleared his throat and tried again. They said they would be happy to provide humanitarian aid, and that we should expect their relief fleet within the week. Relief fleet? The first speaker's tone was confused. How many ships are we talking about? A dozen? 2 dozen? Zethkai looked at the display again, hoping he had misread the number. He hadn't. According to this transmission, first speaker, they're sending 1,200 vessels. The silence that followed was so complete that Zethkai could hear the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. When the first speaker finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. 1,200 ships? For a humanitarian mission? That's what the message says. But that's larger than most military fleets. That's larger than our military fleet. Zethkai knew this all too well. The Veltar Republic's entire naval force consisted of 800 ships, and that was counting every patrol vessel, cargo hauler, and courier ship they had. The humans were sending what amounted to a full-scale invasion force, to deliver food and medical supplies. First speaker, Zethkai said carefully, I think we need to remember what we're dealing with here. The humans are from what the Galactic Council classifies as a Class 12 death world. I know what Earth's classification is, the first speaker snapped. But this is excessive even for them. When the Jorth Collective had their mining disaster last year, what did other civilizations send? The Altarians sent a hospital ship and 2 supply vessels, Zethkai replied, having studied the precedent extensively. The Crystalline Hegemony sent 3 medical frigates and a mobile surgery unit. The Kethmori sent a single vessel with medical supplies and food. Exactly. Normal civilizations send small, specialized aid missions. They don't send, the first speaker paused, and Zethkai could hear her consulting her own data. 1,200 ships including 47 hospital ships, 83 supply vessels, 216 escort fighters, and... Her voice trailed off. And what, first speaker? And a battleship. They're sending a battleship on a humanitarian mission. Zethkai felt his stomach drop. A battleship? The UES Indomitable. According to the intelligence reports, it's one of their newest vessels. The damn thing is 2 kilometers long and carries enough firepower to level a small moon. The ambassador slumped into his chair, all 6 arms going limp. First speaker, what have we gotten ourselves into? 3 weeks earlier, the Veltar Republic had been hit by what their scientists called a perfect storm of natural disasters. First, a massive solar flare had disrupted their planetary defense grid. Then, while their shields were down, a rogue asteroid had impacted their primary agricultural world of Velmora, destroying 60% of their food production facilities and contaminating much of their water supply. Finally, a virulent plague had broken out among the refugee populations, spreading rapidly through the overcrowded emergency shelters. It was a catastrophe of unprecedented proportions for the Republic, which had always prided itself on its self-sufficiency. They had never asked for help from other civilizations, and the very idea of requesting aid went against everything their culture stood for. But faced with the potential starvation of billions and the possible collapse of their entire civilization, the ruling council had made the painful decision to reach out to the galactic community for assistance. The response had been mixed. The Altarians had offered sympathy and a small shipment of medical supplies. The Crystalline Hegemony had promised to send a team of doctors when they could spare them. The Kethmori had offered to purchase any healthy Veltar as indentured servants, which was technically a form of aid, albeit a deeply insulting one. Then the humans had responded. The message had been brief and to the point: we have received your request for humanitarian aid. Relief fleet will arrive within 7 standard days. Please prepare landing zones and coordinate with Fleet Admiral Sarachan for supply distribution. We're on our way. That had been 6 days ago. The human fleet was due to arrive in approximately 18 hours, and the Veltar Republic was scrambling to prepare for what amounted to the largest logistics operation in their history. "Sir?" Lieutenant Commander Velash entered the ambassador's office, his young face creased with worry. "We've received another transmission from the human fleet." Zethkai looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing. "What now?" "They're asking about our orbital infrastructure. Specifically, they want to know if our space elevators can handle heavy cargo loads." "Of course they can. They're rated for vessels up to 500 tons. Velash shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I think there might be a misunderstanding. They're not asking about 500 tons. They're asking about 500,000 tons. Zethkai stared at him. 500,000 tons? What could they possibly be bringing that weighs 500,000 tons? "According to their manifest, sir, they're bringing a complete water purification facility. The message says it's modular and can be assembled on site. It also mentions something about emergency housing units for 2 million displaced persons and a full-scale medical complex with trauma centers and pharmaceutical manufacturing capabilities." The ambassador felt a headache coming on. "Velash, please tell me you're joking." "I'm afraid not, sir. They're also asking about our planetary defense systems. They want to know if we can temporarily lower our shields to allow their cargo vessels to make direct atmospheric entry." "Lower our shields? Are they insane? We're in the middle of a crisis. Our shields are the only thing protecting us from further asteroid impacts. I believe they're concerned about the time it would take to ferry supplies down using our space elevators," Velash explained. "According to their calculations, it would take 3 months to move all their cargo using our current infrastructure." Zethkai rubbed his temples with 2 of his hands while massaging his neck ridges with the other 4. "How much cargo are they bringing?" Velash consulted his datapad. "According to their preliminary manifest, approximately 50 million tons of supplies." 50 million tons? Zethkai's voice came out as a croak. That's more than our entire planet imports in a year." "Yes, sir. The human fleet commander has suggested that we might want to consider expanding our port facilities to handle the increased traffic." "Expanding our port facilities?" Zethkai laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Velash, our largest port can handle maybe 50 ships at a time. They're bringing 1,200 vessels. Actually, sir, the fleet roster has been updated. They're now bringing 1,400 ships." Zethkai closed his eyes and tried to imagine what his ancestors would think of this situation. The Veltar had always been a proud, independent species. They had built their civilization through careful planning, conservative resource management, and an almost pathological aversion to waste. The idea of sending such a massive fleet for a humanitarian mission would have been incomprehensible to them. But then, the Veltar had never met humans before. "Sir?" Velash's voice interrupted his thoughts. "There's something else. The human fleet commander wants to schedule a meeting with our leadership. She says she needs to discuss operational parameters and long-term reconstruction planning." "Long-term reconstruction planning?" Zethkai opened his eyes. "We never asked them to rebuild anything. We just asked for food and medical supplies." "I know, sir. But according to their geological surveys, the asteroid impact has destabilized the tectonic plates on Velmora. They're concerned about secondary disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, that sort of thing. They want to deploy seismic stabilizers and atmospheric processors to prevent further damage." Zethkai felt like he was drowning. "Atmospheric processors? Those are terraforming tools. They're used to reshape entire worlds." "Yes, sir. The humans apparently brought along a full terraforming package, just in case." "Just in case of what?" "I don't know, sir. The message just says they believe in being prepared for contingencies." Zethkai stood up and walked to the window of his office, looking out at the orbital shipyards where Veltar engineers were working frantically to expand their docking facilities. In the distance, he could see the first human scout ships arriving, sleek, predatory-looking vessels that seemed to radiate barely contained power. Velash, he said quietly, I want you to send a message to the first speaker. Tell her that we may have made a terrible mistake. Sir? We asked for help from Deathworlders. We thought they would respond like any other civilization, with a small, efficient aid mission. Instead, they're coming at us with enough firepower and resources to conquer half the galaxy. But sir, they're here to help us. Zethkai turned back to his aide. That's what terrifies me. If this is what they do to help their friends, what do they do to their enemies? Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 1,400 ships materialized simultaneously in the Veltar system, their hulls gleaming in the light of the local star. It was a sight that never failed to fill her with pride, the combined might of the Human Federation's relief fleet, ready to help those in need. Stellar cartography confirms our position, reported Lieutenant Commander Martinez from the navigation station. We're in the Veltar system, approximately 6 million kilometers from the primary world. Excellent, Admiral Chen replied. Communications, please open a channel to the Veltar Republic. Let them know we've arrived and are ready to begin relief operations. Channel open, Admiral. Veltar Republic, this is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Indomitable. The Human Federation Relief Fleet has arrived and is ready to commence humanitarian operations. We have medical supplies, food, water purification equipment, and construction materials. Please advise on priority deployment zones. The response came back almost immediately, though Chen noticed a slight tremor in the alien's voice. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Zethkai. Welcome to the Veltar system. We appreciate your assistance. However, we may need to discuss the scope of your mission. Chen frowned. Is there a problem, Ambassador? Not a problem, exactly. It's just that we weren't expecting quite so many ships. Our infrastructure may not be capable of handling a fleet of this size. Don't worry about that, Chen assured him. We brought our own infrastructure. Engineering teams are already preparing to deploy temporary orbital platforms and supply depots. We'll have everything up and running within 12 hours. There was a long pause before the ambassador replied. You brought your own infrastructure? Of course. We learned long ago that disaster zones often lack the facilities needed for large-scale relief operations. Standard protocol is to establish our own logistics network and then integrate it with local systems. I see. And how large is this logistics network? Chen consulted her datapad. 12 orbital platforms, each capable of handling 50 vessels simultaneously. For mobile repair facilities, 6 fuel depots, and a complete communications array. Plus temporary housing for about 3 million refugees, in case we need to evacuate anyone from the disaster zones. 3 million refugees? Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, Chen replied cheerfully. That's the Human Federation motto for disaster relief. I'm beginning to understand that, the ambassador said weakly. Admiral, interrupted Commander Torres from the tactical station, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. It looks like they've got some kind of planetary defense system active. Chen nodded. Ambassador, we're showing active defensive systems on your world. Are you expecting trouble? Not trouble, exactly. It's just that we're concerned about further asteroid impacts. Our shields are our only protection. Understood. We'll work around them. However, I should mention that we brought along a few asteroid defense platforms. If you'd like, we can deploy them in the outer system to provide additional protection. Asteroid defense platforms? Military-grade installations designed to track and intercept potentially hazardous objects. Each one can handle asteroids up to about 50 kilometers in diameter. We brought 6 of them, should be more than enough to secure your system. Chen could hear what sounded like choking on the other end of the comm channel. Are you all right, Ambassador? I'm fine, came the strained reply. It's just 50 kilometers? The asteroid that hit us was only 2 kilometers across. Well, like I said, better to be over-prepared. We'll have those platforms deployed within the next few hours. In the meantime, I'd like to discuss getting our medical teams down to the surface. We have trauma specialists, disease control experts, and surgical teams ready to go. How many medical teams? About 15,000 doctors, nurses, and support staff. Plus another 5,000 engineers and construction workers for rebuilding efforts. This time, the silence stretched on for nearly a minute. When Ambassador Zethkai finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Did you just say 20,000 personnel? That's just the initial deployment, Chen replied. We have another 30,000 specialists in the second wave, plus about 50,000 construction workers and engineers for the major rebuilding projects. Major rebuilding projects? We'll need to completely reconstruct the agricultural infrastructure on Velmora, of course. The asteroid impact has caused significant environmental damage, so we'll need to deploy atmospheric processors and soil rehabilitation systems. Our geological surveys also indicate potential seismic instability, so we'll need to install tectonic stabilizers. And since your population is displaced, we'll need to build new cities with proper infrastructure, power grids, water systems, waste management, the works. You're talking about rebuilding an entire world, the ambassador said. That's what we do, Chen replied matter-of-factly. The Human Federation has rebuilt 17 worlds over the past century. We've got it down to a science. But we didn't ask you to rebuild our world. We just asked for food and medical supplies. Chen paused, considering this. Ambassador, with respect, sending just food and medical supplies would be like putting a band-aid on a severed limb. Your world has suffered a catastrophic disaster. Half measures won't solve the problem, they'll just prolong the suffering. I understand your reasoning, Admiral, but the scope of what you're proposing is overwhelming. We're not sure we can accept such extensive assistance. May I ask why not? Because we're not sure we can repay it. The Veltar Republic has always been self-sufficient. We've never been in debt to other civilizations, and we're not comfortable with the idea of owing such a massive obligation. Chen smiled, though she knew the ambassador couldn't see it. Ambassador, there's no debt involved. This is humanitarian aid, we don't expect repayment. You're sending what amounts to a full-scale terraforming operation and you don't expect repayment? That's correct. The Human Federation provides disaster relief as a matter of principle. We don't do it for profit or political gain. But surely you must want something in return. Trade agreements, territorial concessions, resource rights? Nothing like that. Although, Chen added thoughtfully, we would appreciate it if you could share your experience with future disaster relief operations. We're always looking to improve our procedures. That's it? You just want us to tell you how well you did? Pretty much. We take our humanitarian obligations seriously, Ambassador. When someone asks for help, we help. It's as simple as that. There was another long pause. Admiral, I need to consult with my government. This is far beyond what we expected. Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll begin deploying our orbital infrastructure in the meantime. Oh, an ambassador? Yes? You might want to warn your people about the noise. When we deploy the atmospheric processors, they tend to be a bit loud. How loud? Well, they're essentially artificial volcanoes. The sound carries for about 1,000 kilometers. Chen could hear what sounded like something heavy hitting the floor on the other end of the comm channel. Ambassador? Are you there? I'm here, came the weak reply. I need to sit down for a moment. Of course. We'll talk more soon. Chen out. The Admiral closed the channel and turned to her staff. All right, people, let's get to work. I want those orbital platforms deployed within 6 hours. Medical teams prep for deployment as soon as we get clearance from the surface. And someone get me a full geological survey of the disaster zone, I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Admiral, said Commander Torres, are we sure about this? The Veltar seem pretty overwhelmed by the scope of our mission.
Chen considered the question.
Commander, 3 weeks ago, these people were facing the potential extinction of their civilization. Their primary food production world was devastated, their water supply was contaminated, and they were dealing with a plague among their refugee populations. If we just dropped off some food and medical supplies and left, they'd be back in the same situation within a year.
But what if they don't want our help?
Then we'll respect their decision.
But I have a feeling that once they see what we can do, they'll come around.
The Human Federation has been doing this for a long time, Commander.
We know how to rebuild civilizations.
Yes, ma'am. It's just that they seem to think we're coming at them with an invasion force.
Chen laughed. In a way, I suppose we are.
An invasion force dedicated to making their lives better.
There are worse things to be invaded by. First speaker Nalthara stood in the center of the Republic's Emergency Command Center, surrounded by displays showing the deployment of the human fleet.
In the past 6 hours, the aliens had constructed an entire orbital infrastructure network around Veltar space, complete with massive platforms that dwarfed anything the Republic had ever built. The scale of this operation is unprecedented, reported Defense Minister Kreltok, his voice tight with stress.
They've deployed assets that we didn't even know existed.
Those orbital platforms they've constructed, each one is larger than our capital spaceport.
What about their military capabilities? Asked the first speaker.
Overwhelming, Kreltok replied bluntly. Their escort fighters alone outnumber our entire fleet by a factor of 3. And that battleship of theirs. He paused, consulting his datapad.
Our intelligence estimates that it could single-handedly destroy every defensive installation we have. Are we in danger? Asked Economic Minister Tralveth.
I don't think so, Kreltok said slowly. Their actions are consistent with a humanitarian mission.
They're not positioning their forces aggressively, and they've been completely transparent about their intentions.
But the fact remains that they have the capability to conquer our entire system without breaking a sweat.
And they're doing all of this to help us? Asked the first speaker. So they claim. Nalthara walked over to the main display, which showed a real-time image of the human fleet. Even spread out across the system, it was an awe-inspiring sight. Have we ever encountered anything like this before?
Never, replied Foreign Minister Yelkes. Most civilizations don't have the capability to deploy forces on this scale. And those that do wouldn't waste them on a humanitarian mission.
But the humans are from a death world, Nalthara mused. Perhaps their definition of normal is different from ours.
That's putting it mildly, Kreltok said.
I've been reviewing their historical records. Do you know what they consider a minor military intervention? I'm afraid to ask.
Last year, they sent a force of 300 ships to protect a single trade route from pirates.
300 ships. To deal with pirates. How many pirates were there?
12 vessels. The first speaker stared at him. They sent 300 ships to deal with 12 pirates? According to their records, they wanted to send a clear message about the consequences of interfering with civilian commerce.
The pirates surrendered without firing a shot. I can imagine they would, Nalthara said dryly. What about their previous humanitarian missions?
Yelkes consulted her own datapad. They've conducted 17 major disaster relief operations over the past century. The smallest involved 60 ships. The largest involved over 2,000 vessels.
2,000 ships for disaster relief? That was the Krentak system.
An entire star was going nova, and they evacuated 4 billion people in less than 6 months.
They evacuated 4 billion people?
And rebuilt their civilization on 3 different worlds.
The operation took 2 years and involved the largest logistics network in galactic history. First speaker Nalthara felt a chill run down her spine. What have we gotten ourselves into?
I'm not sure, Yelkes replied.
But I don't think we have a choice anymore. Our people are dying, and the humans are the only ones offering real help. At what cost? I don't think there is one. That's what scares me.
Before anyone could respond, the communication system chimed with an incoming message.
First speaker, this is Admiral Chen of the human fleet. We've completed our initial deployment and are ready to begin relief operations.
We'd like to schedule a meeting with your leadership to coordinate our efforts. Nealthara looked around the room at her advisors, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in their faces.
Admiral Chen, this is first speaker Nealthara. We would be honored to meet with you. However, we must discuss the scope of your mission.
What you're proposing goes far beyond what we requested.
I understand your concerns, first speaker.
Perhaps it would be better to discuss this in person.
I can be at your capital within the hour.
You're coming to the surface? If that's acceptable. I find these conversations go better face to face.
Of course.
We'll prepare for your arrival.
Thank you.
I'll be bringing a small delegation, just myself and a few key staff members.
How many is a few?
About 50 people. Medical specialists, engineers, cultural liaisons, that sort of thing.
Nealthara closed her eyes.
Even their small delegations were larger than most diplomatic missions.
Very well. We'll arrange accommodations.
That won't be necessary. We're bringing our own transport and security detail.
Security detail? Standard precaution.
Nothing excessive, just 2 platoons of Marines and a few support vehicles.
2 platoons of Marines? About 80 soldiers. They'll remain with our transport unless their services are needed. After the communication ended, the command center fell silent. Finally, Defense Minister Kreltok spoke up. They're bringing 80 soldiers to a diplomatic meeting?
That's what she said.
First speaker, 80 human soldiers could probably conquer our capital city.
I'm beginning to realize that, Nealthara replied. But what choice do we have? Our people are dying, and they're the only ones offering real help. Are we sure this is help and not conquest? I don't think they're trying to conquer us, Yelkes said thoughtfully. If they wanted to take over our system, they wouldn't need to pretend it was a humanitarian mission. They could just demand our surrender.
Then what do they want?
I think they want exactly what they say they want, to help us rebuild our civilization.
But why? What's in it for them?
Maybe nothing, Nealthara said. Maybe they're just the kind of people who help others because it's the right thing to do.
That's a terrifying thought, Kreltok said.
Why?
Because it means they're not motivated by greed or politics or strategic advantage. They're motivated by principle.
And people who are motivated by principle are the most dangerous of all, because you can never predict what they'll do next. Admiral Chan's shuttle descended through Veltar's atmosphere, accompanied by 2 escort fighters and a transport carrying her security detail. The Veltar capital city spread out below them, a gleaming metropolis of crystalline spires and floating platforms. It was beautiful, but Chen could see the signs of strain: overcrowded refugee camps on the outskirts, emergency shelters hastily constructed in parks and plazas. Population density is about 3 times normal, reported her aide, Commander Williams. The refugees from Velmora are putting a serious strain on the infrastructure.
Are our temporary housing units ready for deployment?
Yes, ma'am. We can have emergency shelters for 2 million people deployed within 24 hours.
Good. What about the medical situation?
Their hospitals are overwhelmed. They've got about 12,000 plague cases and not enough medical supplies to treat them properly.
Our medical teams are standing by.
Chen nodded as their shuttle touched down on the landing pad outside the Veltar Capitol building. The structure was impressive, a towering spire of blue-green crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. But she could see the defensive systems built into its architecture, the weapon emplacements hidden among the decorative elements.
Nervous hosts, she observed. Can you blame them?
Williams replied.
We probably look like an invasion force to them.
I suppose we do. But sometimes you have to overwhelm the problem to solve it properly. They were met at the landing pad by a delegation of Veltar officials, led by a tall, graceful alien with 6 arms and scales that shimmered in the sunlight. Ambassador Zethkai, Chen realized, whom she'd spoken with earlier.
Admiral Chen, the ambassador said, approaching with what looked like a formal bow. Welcome to Veltar. I am Ambassador Zethkai, and this is our delegation. Thank you for receiving us, Chen replied, returning the bow.
This is my staff, Commander Williams, Dr. Sarah Park from our Medical Division, and Engineer Captain Martinez from our Construction Corps.
Construction Corps? We brought along some specialists in rapid infrastructure deployment.
In case you need any emergency construction work done.
I see. First speaker Naelthara is waiting for us inside.
As they walked through the Capitol building, Chen couldn't help but notice the architecture. Everything was designed for beings with 6 arms, the doorways were wider, the furniture was more complex, and there were handholds positioned at heights that would be awkward for humans. But there was also something else, a sense of careful design, of every element serving multiple purposes. Your architecture is very efficient, she observed. We pride ourselves on not wasting resources, Zethkai replied. Every structure is designed to serve multiple functions, and we use only what we need.
That's admirable. We tend to approach things differently. How so? We believe in redundancy and over-engineering. Better to have too much than too little. That's certainly consistent with the size of your relief fleet. Chen smiled. We've learned that disasters have a way of being worse than you expect. It's better to bring too much help than to show up unprepared.
They entered a large chamber where the Veltar leadership was waiting.
First speaker Naelthara was an impressive figure, taller than the ambassador, with scales that seemed to shift color in the light. She was flanked by what Chen assumed were her key advisors. Admiral Chen, the first speaker said, welcome to Veltar. We are grateful for your assistance, though we must admit we are somewhat overwhelmed by the scope of your mission. I understand your concerns, first speaker. Perhaps we should discuss what we're actually proposing to do. Please, sit. Though I should warn you, our furniture may not be entirely suitable for your physiology. That's all right. We brought portable chairs. Chen gestured to Williams, who produced a set of lightweight chairs from the equipment pack he'd been carrying. We've learned to be prepared for different architectural styles. The first speaker watched this with obvious amazement. You brought furniture to a diplomatic meeting? We brought everything we thought we might need. It's easier than trying to improvise on the spot.
I'm beginning to understand that, Naelthara said as they all took their seats. Admiral, we appreciate your offer of assistance, but we must discuss the scale of what you're proposing.
When we asked for humanitarian aid, we were expecting food and medical supplies.
What you're describing sounds more like, well, like rebuilding our entire civilization. That's essentially what we're proposing, Chen agreed.
But let me explain why.
She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the Veltar system. Your primary agricultural world has been devastated by the asteroid impact. Even if we provide immediate food relief, you'll be facing potential famine within 6 months. Your water supply is contaminated, your refugee population is dealing with a plague, and your infrastructure is strained beyond capacity.
We understand all of that, the first speaker said.
But surely these are problems we can solve ourselves, given time.
How much time? Chen asked.
Our projections show that without immediate intervention, you'll lose approximately 30% of your population within the next year. With traditional humanitarian aid, food and medical supplies, you might reduce that to 20%.
Is that acceptable?
The room fell silent.
Finally, Defense Minister Kreltok spoke up. And with your intervention?
0%, Chen replied. We can stop the immediate dying within weeks, rebuild your agricultural capacity within 6 months, and have your civilization fully restored within 2 years.
At what cost? Asked the first speaker. No cost to you. This is humanitarian aid.
But the resources you're deploying, the scale of this operation, it must be costing your government billions of credits.
Chen shrugged. The Human Federation has a standing budget for disaster relief. We've allocated about 50 billion credits to this operation. 50 billion credits?
The first speaker's voice was barely a whisper.
That's more than our entire annual budget. Disaster relief is expensive, Chen acknowledged. But it's also necessary.
We've learned that half measures don't work. You have to address the root causes of the problem, not just the symptoms.
But why? Asked Foreign Minister Yelkas. Why would you spend so much to help people you barely know? Chen considered the question. Because it's the right thing to do. Your people are suffering, and we have the capability to help. That's reason enough. But surely you must want something in return. Trade agreements, territorial concessions, access to resources? Nothing like that.
Though we would appreciate it if you could share your experience with other civilizations who might face similar disasters. We're always looking for ways to improve our disaster relief procedures. The Veltar leadership exchanged glances. Finally, the first speaker spoke.
Admiral, I must be honest with you. This is far beyond anything we expected.
We're not sure we can accept such extensive assistance.
May I ask why not? Because we don't understand your motivations.
In our experience, no civilization does anything without expecting something in return. What you're proposing is so generous that it seems suspicious.
Chen nodded. I understand. You're wondering if there's a hidden agenda. Exactly. There isn't. The Human Federation provides disaster relief because we believe it's morally necessary. We have the resources and the capability, so we help. It's as simple as that. But your fleet, it's larger than most military forces. Are you sure this isn't some kind of invasion? If we wanted to invade your system, we wouldn't need to pretend it was a humanitarian mission. We could just demand your surrender.
That's what we're afraid of, Kreltok said quietly. Chen looked around the room, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their faces.
I think I understand the problem. You're not used to dealing with Deathworlders. What does that mean?
It means we approach problems differently than most civilizations.
When we see a disaster, we don't just try to manage it, we try to eliminate it. When we provide aid, we don't just address the immediate symptoms, we fix the underlying problems. So you're saying this is normal for humans? Completely normal.
We've been doing disaster relief for over a century, and we've learned that there's no such thing as a small disaster. Every crisis has the potential to become a civilization-ending catastrophe if it's not addressed properly.
And you always respond with fleets this large?
We scale our response to the size of the problem. Your situation requires a large-scale response.
First speaker Elthara was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, what would happen if we refused your aid?
Then we'd respect your decision and withdraw. But I should point out that you'd be condemning millions of your people to death.
And if we accept?
Then we'll rebuild your civilization and make sure this kind of disaster never happens again.
How can you guarantee that?
Chen smiled.
Because we're very good at what we do. The Human Federation has rebuilt 17 civilizations over the past century.
Every one of them is now more prosperous and more secure than they were before the disaster.
What about their independence? What about it?
We rebuild their infrastructure, train their people, and then leave.
We don't establish colonies or demand tribute. We just help them get back on their feet. You just leave?
That's right. Though we do maintain diplomatic relations and offer ongoing technical assistance if needed. The first speaker looked around the room at her advisors.
Could we have some time to discuss this privately?
Of course.
We'll wait outside.
As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Chen could hear the urgent whispers of the Veltar leadership. She wasn't surprised by their reaction. Most civilizations found it difficult to believe that.